Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Orbit Live event. I'm excited to welcome two fantastic science fiction authors, Megan E. O'Keefe and Kristyn Merbeth. Megan is the author of the Protectorate series. The first two books, Velocity Weapon and Chaos Vector, are out now. Kristyn is the author of the Nova Vita Protocol series, and you can catch up with the first book, Fortuna, if you haven't already. And the second book of the series, Memoria, is out today. Throughout the event tonight, Megan and Kristyn will be answering your questions. You can submit any questions you have by clicking the Ask a Question link below the video. If you're on the mobile app, that will be the question mark icon below the video. We already have some great questions, and feel free to ask more. You can also vote on your fellow attendees' questions so that the questions with the most votes are answered first. This event is being recorded, and you will be able to access the replay using the same Crowdcast link you used to enter the event. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the event over to Megan and Kristyn. Take it away.
Okay, hi everybody. Excited to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone. Excited to be here. Appreciate you all coming away from the new Cyberpunk game or the new Final Fantasy patch that both launched today to say hello to us.
Goodness, so many distractions.
I know. It's a good day. There's a lot of good things in the world today. Including Memoria. David said sacrifices are being made. He should be playing Final Fantasy right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Yes, such a sacrifice. We treasure it. All right, so it looks like the question we've got at the top of the queue here is, these are both second books in your series. What was easier and harder about writing the second book compared to the first? Kristyn, do you want to take that away?
Sure. So first of all, with the second book, I think the easiest thing was that I didn't have to do all of the world building and coming up with characters and all of that up front. And for this series especially, I had to do a lot of research and stuff beforehand, which is not usually what I like to do. I usually just like to jump right in, start writing as soon as possible. So I was able to do that with the second book, which was great. But it was also harder in that I think there was a lot more pressure, in that I knew I already had some readers of the series who I wanted to do right by, and I wanted to do justice for my characters and make sure it kind of lived up to the first book, but also did more and better and kept going. And so that was just kind of a lot going on in my head as I was trying to write, and it was distracting me. But, eventually I pushed through that, and I was glad to just revisit this world and characters in the end. How about you, Megan?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, similar experience. It's convenient in that you already have the world set up and all the characters are sort of in place. Their personalities are developed. So you don't have to do nearly as much front loading as you do with the first in the series. It's more complicated overall for me. The second book usually is, because it has to carry so many more plot lines than the first and the third book even. I saw a chart once, because I love graphical representations of plot structures. So I saw this really neat plot where it was, the 3-book arc, and it had, 3 little hill humps, for the plot for book 1 and book 2 and book 3. And then it showed you how many plots have to carry from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 3, and how many start in 2 and in 1 and in 3. And book 2 is doing 6 times the amount of work that the other 2 books are doing, sort of on average based on this graph. Then when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that's why it's such a problem. These second books are complicated, but incredibly rewarding, so that's nice.
Yeah. I also felt when planning out the series as a whole, it's always book 1, there's a lot of setup and stuff you want to do, and book 3 is finishing up the story, obviously, and I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to end out with the characters and stuff. But book 2 is tougher in that it's kind of a journey book getting to the end game, and it's just, you want to carry on threads, but you don't have to finish them up here if you want to continue into book 3, but you could. But it's just a lot of decision making I found as I was plotting. I don't know if it was the same for you.
What do you want to tie off? What do you want to carry on? That kind of stuff. What do you want to bring up that you will then have to carry on and tie off? Yeah, it's the messy middle of any book, but on a grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
Does your story inspiration usually come from a character, situation, or science facts slash speculation? The answer for me is just a flat yes. Like it comes from anywhere, anytime. I usually pick up some sort of core idea along the way. It could be a character, it could be a plot, it could be a plot twist, a world, something like that. Sometimes it's just a theme. Velocity Weapon started because I wanted to do something where everyone was sort of an unreliable narrator to one degree or another. And then, like, once I've got that core idea, like, it's, the pearl metaphor where it starts, like, accreting other ideas until it becomes a fully formed thing over time. And that tends to be how it works for me personally. And I can never say for sure what idea is going to be the sort of core spark. What kind of idea is going to be the core spark, I should say. What about you, Kristyn?
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. Is that it's like different with every book, and a lot of the times it's hard to like trace it back to like what exactly was the first thing I came out with, because usually it's been kind of growing in my head for like a while by the time I sit down to write. Though with this series, actually, I do remember it was the world I came up with first. And it was inspired by NASA's announcement of the discovery of TRAPPIST-1, which is like a cool planetary system with a red dwarf star and like multiple planets in the potentially habitable zone. And they released all these cool like graphics about like what the worlds might look like and like planet hopping, because they're all so close together they can like see one another in the sky. And like, so that for me was what sparked the idea for this world, which is really based off of that. And the rest kind of came later.
Nice.
And I'm curious with yours, without spoiling anything, there's the plot twists in your book are just incredible. You're the queen of plot twists. So when it came to this original idea, like how soon did you come up with that? Was it like part of like the core idea that you originally had, or did you come up with it a little bit like down the line, or how'd that happen?
That was a part of the original concept. Yeah, that was from right off the bat. I knew I was going to do. There are like three major turns in the story throughout the trilogy, and there is one in Velocity Weapon, and there's one in Chaos Vector, and there's one in Catalyst Gate. And I knew what all three of those were going to be. And without spoiling too much, I can say the first one in Velocity Weapon was kind of inspired by the idea of deep fake videos, which were becoming popular at the time. Or not, maybe not popular, but more widely known and talked about. Hopefully not popular. That's
new trend.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, so that was definitely integral to the book and the world from the beginning for me.
Yeah. I aspire to one day pull off a plot twist like you.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's a lot to juggle, but it's fun when it works. So. Yeah, your trilogy sort of centers around this family, and I love the idea of the mother, which is a weird thing to say because she's actually a horrible person, but her grand plan we were talking about, the different planets in the system is to, have a kid on each of these planets, so she has access into these planets to continue her smuggling. How did you come up with that? Was that originally a part of the NASA idea of the multi-inhabitable planet system? Was that sort of, or did it come out of it?
I think it came a little further down the line, because I came up with the planets and such first, and then kind of as I was further developing the idea, I came up with the idea that like they really don't have much contact and they don't trust one another. So then when I decided I wanted to do this crime family idea who was smuggling between planets, I was like, well, okay, how do they cross over these borders that are otherwise closed, and how do they kind of pull off this big heist? And that's when I came up with the idea of her having the kids on various planets kind of cheat her way through the laws and be able to pass over borders that are closed to almost everyone else.
It's a really cool idea, just for the smuggling family.
So much fun with them. I love my criminals. So let's see. If you could write and have published any book, regardless of genre, potential sales, or copyright laws, what would that dream book be, Megan?
David's baiting me here, I think. I suspect. Big fan of the Final Fantasy series. Obviously, love to write anything in that world. I'm also a big fan of the Nier Automata series. Love that world. Unfortunately, both of them tend not to hire Western authors for Square Enix games and/or novels, at least not to my knowledge. That's probably not a thing that will happen. I'll have to keep to thinly veiled fan fiction in my normal novel. But I do adore those worlds and would love to put original stories in them. What about you, Kristyn?
What's your favorite Final Fantasy? Real fast, I gotta ask.
Oh god, so this is the thing that'll get me strung up by like half the population and celebrated by the rest. So 7 is what I imprinted on. That was my first one, so that will always hold a special place in my heart. Yeah, I'm being judged.
Oh, no.
I do love 7. I love 6. I am playing way too much Final Fantasy 14 right now. So as far as hours played, I could probably say Final Fantasy 14, but 7 will always be the first for me.
My favorite is actually Final Fantasy Tactics, and I'm replaying it right now on an emulator, and I'm so excited. Like, I played it as a kid, and I love the world and the characters so much. I'm so excited to revisit it.
It's so good. Like, I have it on my phone now, which is just kind of mind-blowing.
How is the phone version? I was wondering. I saw it was available, but I was like, I don't know if I trust it.
It's okay. It plays pretty well. I still like it on a bigger screen just because I like to see all the graphics a little better. But it plays just fine.
I'll try it then. For me,
what world would you write it?
I'm thinking, honestly, like, I love video games, but I don't know if I'd ever want to write in a video game world because the fans, like, are scary. So, like, I want to say Final Fantasy Tactics. Like I just said, it's my favorite game of all time, and I just love it. But also, like, I feel like one wrong move and they'd come for me.
Oh, yeah. It's, yeah. When you make that calculation, you have to consider you're putting yourself on a precipice there.
Yes. So I also would love to write, I'm not sure the fans would be any better, but like a Gundam book series would be amazing to write.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Robot battles.
That would be awesome. Love a robot battle.
PSP version, yeah, it's really good. I love the cutscenes. That's the one I'm playing through right now.
Oh, okay.
So good.
So we got which sci-fi story, books, and/or films and/or video games influenced you to write your books? I think we can both safely say Final Fantasy at this point.
Oh, yes.
Had some influence at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so I came into science fiction a little backwards. I know a lot of people started out with the more like space opera, hard SF kind of stuff, but I came in via cyberpunk. Came in with William Gibson, and then I think, oh gosh, what is it? Gravity Fails. I cannot remember. Like, I read this when I was 13. It was a whole series set in a Middle Eastern city that was cyberpunk, and that was just like incredible for me as a kid. So I started from that direction and more of like the software like bio-integration side of things, and that's influenced a lot of what I like to write. What about you?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know, I think my first sci-fi book that I remember really falling in love with was Ender's Game, which I do still enjoy, but it was a little heartbreaking to find out about the author's politics and such. That was kind of changed the book a bit in my eyes, but I still credit it with getting me into sci-fi. Otherwise, I love Firefly. I love Star Wars, obviously. I'm not a super fan, so please don't ask me questions, but I do enjoy the movies. And yeah, I don't know. There's just so much stuff. I always find it hard to be like, yes, this is what influenced me, when I feel like it was really just growing up with so many like books and video games and anime and like everything just kind of becoming this, building me into this nerdy person who wants to write these kinds of stories.
Yeah, it's definitely just kind of a, like, I don't know, mix of everything. It's hard, it really is hard to point to one thing that sparked an idea. I would say probably I'm rereading the question. They did mention films, and I remember imprinting very early on the Alien movies, Alien and Abyss, which is like incredibly cheesy, but it was so good. Loved it at the time. Abyss was great.
I was obsessed with the Matrix movies when they came out.
Oh god,
yeah. That was an early jump into the genre. I was like the first Matrix was the first rated R movie I was ever allowed to watch, and I was just like in love with it. So that's probably why you get all the big gunfights and everything in my stories. They're all just the love story to the Matrix.
Oh yeah, I definitely imprinted on the Matrix. I was very much the goth kid in the trench coat before the movie came out. And then the movie came out, and I was like, I'm also a computer. This is amazing. That stuck.
Looking at the chat. Oh yeah, I loved the book War Girls. It was inspired by Gundam. Yeah, it's so cool. The giant robot fights. Oh, everything I wanted. It's a great book.
I missed that. I'll have to check that out.
Should. It's incredible.
I'm gonna skip the wrap-up question, which is at the top of my list for some reason.
Yeah.
So both of you have written for other genres prior to your current SF series. Why did you start writing the other genres, and what drew you to writing SF? Tuna. I can go for that if you'd like.
Yes, you go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, genres are kind of malleable. I'm not really a big, this is the rigid box that we put science fiction in, this is the rigid box that we put fantasy in person. I thought when I was writing the Scorched Continent series that I was writing secondary world fantasy. It got marketed as steampunk and epic fantasy, science fantasy occasionally, because I mean, the solution to like the big problem in the world is like the blood-brain barrier. So I've always kind of stuck science in my fantasy and the other way around. So it wasn't particularly a big leap for me. I like both. I like a lot of different genres. I love me cozy mystery sometimes too. So it wasn't. I didn't have to change modes in how I approach world building or anything like that when I started the science fiction book. For me, space opera is particularly interesting because it is such an open genre that allows for a lot of reinterpretation, exploration, experimentation. You can do just about anything you want with space opera, and as long as you are in space, then you're good. Like, you're still doing space opera, and that's truly appealing from a genre perspective. I like to experiment quite a bit, and it gives me the freedom to do that.
So, yeah, I guess, oops, I lost the question. There it is. So yeah, I've kind of always enjoyed reading a bunch of genres and wanted to write a lot of different stuff, kind of like you. Like, I also love fantasy, I love thriller, like all kinds of stuff. I think space opera has always been one of my favorites, but I was scared to write it for a long time because there is so much big world building involved, and like especially because, like, as I mentioned, my preference is just to start writing and see what happens, and it's really tough to do that when you have to like build your world pretty much from the ground up. So my first post-apocalyptic series was way easier for me to just do my thing, just jump in, add fight scenes wherever I want. Like, it was great. Like, it just kind of a discovery process. But once I wrapped that up, I did kind of want to work on something bigger and more epic. And I had this sci-fi world in my head. So I decided that's what I wanted to try to do next and kind of push myself to step out of my writing comfort zone and just write something bigger and better. Also, I think just the last few years have been so wonderful for sci-fi. There have been so many amazing books coming out. Like there's that like push the boundaries of what the genre can be. Like Gideon the Ninth was a revolution. It's amazing. I'm in love with that book. There's like Cameron Hurley is doing some incredible stuff. City in the Middle of the Night, A Memory Called Empire. Like just so many wonderful books that are also exploring things like gender and sexuality in ways that like weren't a lot in the old sci-fi canon. So yeah, it's really exciting to kind of see that happening and be a part of it.
Yeah, the genre is definitely really opened up over the last couple of years, and but I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yes, for the 9th.
All right. If your series was adapted to another medium, what would you like to see if as film, TV, animated, graphic novel, video game, etc.? So I believe, yeah, which would you prefer of those?
It's tough because yeah, there's just, I mean, it would be amazing to see it as anything. And like my nerdy heart just wants to say video game. Always, that's right. Like my just like, yes, I want to play my story. That sounds incredible.
No, I found out the voice actress for Commander Shepard, the female Commander Shepard, is now doing audiobooks.
Oh, I have
lost my mind.
Item on my bucket list.
Emailed my agent. I was like, so next time.
Oh my gosh.
We don't really have a lot of influence, but just in case.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but okay, got off track thinking about video games. But yeah, I would actually love to, no, by all means, it's always the best thing to talk about. But I would actually love to see this series, in particular, as a TV show. I think like making it into a movie would be a challenge because the world is so big and there's so many characters and stuff. But a TV series, just like being able to explore the different like points of view and planets and all that kind of stuff, I think that would be probably my dream adaptation. How about you?
Definitely a TV series, if I got to choose. I recently signed with a film agent, actually, so that is something we're currently looking into. And yeah, realistically, it's like whoever wants to pay me, that would be super. Yeah, we are looking into TV and film. But I would love a video game. That would just be so cool.
Yes. I could die happy if that happened.
Yeah.
Also, board game would be cool too. I love that too.
That would be neat. Yeah. Just everything. All of the above.
Yes.
I think
my answer is yes.
Answer to that question.
Yeah. Let's see. As a bookseller, I'm often suggesting sci-fi fantasy books to all ages. What do either of you think the minimum age group is for your books?
I'm bad at this. So, yeah, I was, as a child, I read a lot of things I shouldn't. So my barometer is a little miscalibrated in this direction. I would say it depends on the kid. If we're talking, I presume we're talking mostly about young adults and that kind of thing. There is a language. There is a fair amount of violence. None of it is too particularly graphic, though some of it can be unsettling. I mean, there's a head in a jar at one point. So it really, I would say it definitely depends on the kid and what they have already read and enjoyed before and been okay with. If they're like most kids and playing video games, like if they played the Mass Effect games, if they played any BioWare game, really, they're probably okay with it. Say it's young teens, maybe. I don't know. What about you, Kristyn? Do you know how children work?
Unfortunately, no. They are also a mystery to me. But yeah, I think pretty much the same for my books. It really depends on like what the kid can handle. It's mostly violence and language in my books as well. I don't think there's anything like super like gory and gross kind of violence. Well, book 2 also has some spicy scenes. So that if that's a concern as well, and maybe not super young teens. But I would say I would guess like 15 and up, maybe. Like maybe PG-13 kind of. I think if you could handle a PG-13 movie, you could probably handle my series for sure.
I think Kelly is a bookseller here, and she mentioned in the chat that adult situations are what parents are more concerned about than language and violence, which sort of tracks with my expectations of American culture. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, if that's the main concern, I would. Head in a Jar is very exciting.
It's pretty exciting, yeah.
I also get excited. So.
I enjoyed it. I don't know what that says about me, but. All right, so I'd be interested to hear about your process for writing the socio-cultural elements of your sci-fi. How do you figure out how these elements should interact with your tech or natural science elements? Do you want me to run with it a little?
Yeah, sure. What have you got, Megan?
So for me, the elements are inextricably intertwined. How a world is built. When I say that, I mean, like, I'm talking like planetary geophysics, like where things are, what kind of minerals you have access to, all that kind of thing, is so heavily tied to what kind of culture springs up and what kind of attitudes evolve. I mean, obviously, like, individuals shape things and different perspectives change how you interact with the world. But they cannot be separated to me. So my social cultural elements are, at least in the Protectorate series, I was very focused on the fact that functionally this looks like an empire. The governing body thinks it's an elegant, egalitarian meritocracy. It's not. Any society that thinks it is those things usually is not those things. But because of that is the way they think of themselves, they try to do some things correctly, but have blind spots that are instilled from the fact that they came up from the fact that they were a corporation. And they were a corporation founded around a cult personality for the most part. So that also colors the way they think about people, about each other, about who has the right to change things and why. And those two things can't be separated. When I do world building, like, they have to play off of each other. Yeah. A little, yeah, some of that's kind of the geographic environmental determinism. A little bit, I don't go full guns, germs, and steel. I have issues with that book. But similar, like, I always consider who has access to the resources, excuse me, which resources are valuable and why.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I guess I approached it in kind of the same way in this series, and that I was developing 5 different planets, which are very different in geography and climate and everything. And in this planetary system, the worlds, I guess, I call them habitable, but really survivable is more of like a better term, because they're all very, very challenging worlds to live in. From like Titan is like this icy, like brutal world with very little resources, and on Deva there are plants that are grown over everything, and it's kind of a constant battle to try to keep human settlements there. So I based a lot of my ideas on their culture from like the challenges they would face, and like what kind of like what you mentioned, the things they would have access to or not have access to, and how that kind of shapes them and shapes what they value. And yeah, kind of all went from there. So I think the two are very, very strongly linked.
I'll add to that. I'm a big believer in exploring the history is a liar concept. The history that you think is true is not the history that actually happened, and the history that, nobody has the real history of any given world or society. We talk about how victors write the history books, but the truth is that those start being rewritten long before a victor is ever determined in any given war. People start adjusting the narrative to suit whatever their ideal outcome is very early on. So nobody has sort of a full story in a world either when I'm world building, and that obviously affects socio-political status and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very unfortunately relevant thing nowadays, when we're seeing a lot of like people trying to like decide what the truth is, which shouldn't be something up for discussion, but yet
We see it rewritten
there
in
it
time.
is. Yeah.
Oh, this was just for Kristyn. Okay, so I'm going to ask you like an interviewer. Kristyn, how long did it take you to develop the writing style you currently have? It is so freaking engaging.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't know. I mean, I've been pretty much writing my whole life. So I guess my whole life is the answer. But I think part of how I kind of discovered this style that really works for me is that I just tried a lot of different things. I wrote a lot of different things, different genres, different points of view. I definitely really started to come into my own as far as writing in high school, when I swapped from third person past tense to first person present tense, which just, I usually prefer to read in the other, but first person writing for me just works a lot better. And I found that that's when I really started to find myself developing a voice and stuff like that. So, yeah. Megan, I love your writing style as well, and your work is so like clean and like, I don't know, you don't get like bogged down by a bunch of like flowery stuff, but also like you have some sentences that are just beautifully crafted. And how did you kind of come up with your style and settle into it? And
I feel like I'm being attacked here.
No, only attacked with love.
love. So similar stuff. I mean, I've written across a bunch of different genres, and when you do that, you sort of see the pieces that stick out as being fundamentally your voice. And for me, I write right now. All my published work you'll see is in third person past tense, but I do have a novella coming out that's first person present, and it's extremely voicey. When I pitched it to my agent, I pitched it as Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian meets Philip K. Dick. He changed that to Mad Max meets superheroes, which is probably more marketable, but definitely has that sort of backcountry grit texture to the prose, while being first person present, and yet I can still see how my voice emerges in it. And for me, it has a lot to do with rhythm, like where I put the line breaks, where I put the joke, because I always put the joke, where the little sarcastic line is. How those things pop up over time in the prose is something I've learned that I do instinctively. And after I learned I did it instinctively, I looked at it a little more systematically and tried to refine it a bit more.
I always find it so hard to like force like humor and stuff in there, but I find
Yeah,
it's like,
gotta be natural.
yeah, I find that with a good voice and like a good cast of characters, it tends to come out more naturally.
Yeah.
Also, follow-up question: when can I read the novella? Because I want it now.
I might get in trouble here. It is technically unannounced, and maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. But it's slated for March, so I assume the announcement will come extremely soon because of that.
Yes.
So yeah, March of next year, in theory, if all things go well. So.
Excellent. Okay. The world is about to end. What is the one book you have been meaning to read but haven't read yet that you grab and finish prior to the apocalypse?
I'm mad at the what is your one favorite question?
Oh, it's so tough because it's also like if you've been meaning to read it but you haven't yet, like what if it's bad? What if
I know. What
your
if
last book on Earth is
line?
just a wild disappointment?
I currently, like, my Kindle is overburdened with things that I want to read and am going to read, one of which is David's next book, actually. That he very much flattered me with. But wait, never mind. Yeah, right. Didn't think I'd talk about it. Apparently, it's partially inspired by Velocity Weapon, which is like the biggest compliment in the world as far as I'm concerned. So I'm dying to read that. Yeah. I've also got The Unbroken on my Kindle, which I'm dying to read. Is it Cherry? I can't recall. She uses initials and then Cherry for her name. It's the arm flexing cover. I know that much. CL Clark.
I know what you're talking about. That like lit the light bulb in my brain. I'm like, oh, the arm cover. I'm jealous.
The arm cover. That's all I got. But I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, I have so many books on my TBR pile right now. I guess I have Song of Achilles I just got for my birthday, and I really loved her other book, so maybe I'll go with that. I gotta read that before I die.
Miller is incredible.
Mm-hmm. I also just played Hades, so I'm like very much on a Greek mythology kick.
Oh yeah, I have heard nothing but good things about that game. I need to get to it.
Amazing. Yes, you should play it.
Hi, when writing when writing futuristic sci-fi / space opera, do you feel obligated to include Earth as part of the history, or is that too random of a question? Thanks for your time. Nothing's too random. For me, it depends on the world I'm building. I have some worlds. So like I said, I don't approach my world building for science fiction any differently than I approach my world building for fantasy. So that means secondary world space opera is totally on the table for me. And what secondary world means when you're talking about fantasy is that the planet and everything in it is an entire new invention. Everything's new. There was no Earth. There's never been an Earth. It's a brand new fabrication. And I am perfectly happy to do that in space opera as well. The Protectorate series does have Earth in its past. My next scheduled trilogy that is space opera does also have an Earth in its recent past. But I also have one that my agent is currently reading that has no Earth in its past. So it really just depends on the story and what I'm trying to tell.
Yeah, I would say I don't know that I'd feel obligated. I think as a reader, I've read some series where it's never mentioned, and I'm just like, okay, I guess Earth is long gone. So yeah, Earth was like a very, very long time ago in my books, so it's really just I think there are a couple throwaway lines about it, and that's it. But it is addressed there a little bit. So yeah, but I think with writing, if you're not interested in it, there's no need to throw it in there. Readers will they'll be along for the ride either way.
Yep. What's your secrets to writing a good plot twist and/or fight scene? Do you have secrets, Kristyn? Secrets that you're keeping from us all?
Secrets. I can't share my secrets. Then you'll all be able to write fight scenes. And then that actually sounds great. If I had a secret, I would definitely share it so that there would just be fight scenes everywhere. But no, I mean, I guess the way I approach fight scenes is usually that I just kind of sit there with a blank page in front of me and I basically run through it in my head like a movie and just play it out start to finish, get really excited about it, and then I start writing and just try to scribble everything down as fast as possible, start to end, before it kind of slips away. And then later I go back to edit for like pacing and stuff like that. But I think really the main thing with fight scenes to keep in mind is just have really strong visuals, and keep it kind of as clean and tightly paced as possible so that the reader doesn't lose that visual in their head as they're reading it. How about you with the plot twists? What's your secret? Tell me now.
So primarily, my main thing that I would actually consider like a technique that you can take and apply to your own work, if that's what you want to do, is thematic resonance. I think where a lot of plot twists fall short and feel kind of gimmicky and hokey is when you switch from, so your reader starts reading the book, right? And they think, okay, we are going to go achieve this thing. Say, I want to go home. That is the main plot line of protagonist, right? Character wants to go home. And then we get to the middle and your plot twist comes in and it completely undermines and changes the goal in some way. And now maybe the goal isn't, I want to go home. It's I want to burn my home down, or I want to run away from home, or something like that. I find they're more satisfying when fundamentally the thematic goal is still the same. Like you're still trying to find home in some way after that twist, but home has been completely contextualized. That is my big secret. It's not a secret. I have a whole Twitter thread about it. Like it's not, I have no secrets. Not capable, unless I'm telling a story, apparently. So that sort of like thematic binding pulls the character and hopefully the reader through the whole story regardless, because then you don't feel like, well, but I wanted to read this story. Like I wanted to read the story about them getting home. I don't want to read the story about them running away. So it's, you don't feel like the story has changed fundamentally enough that you're no longer interested in it. If that makes sense. It goes along with like making promises to the reader. You're like, this is the kind of story I'm going to tell you. This is the road we are on. Is a pact you make really right up front with those first few chapters, in the first few pages, if you can do it. And undermining that often erodes reader trust, and that's not something you usually want to do, especially if you are going to dramatically change things. You don't want to actually take all the trust away, so then they don't trust anything. That's not good.
Yeah, so it's all about fulfilling the promise, but in a different way that they expect.
Exactly, and hopefully a more interesting way. Mm-hmm. That's the goal.
When it comes to writing and making a living, have you avoided a book because you fear it won't sell?
Do you have thoughts on that? We throw the ball back and forth. The answer is no, but complicated. I grew up in a single-parent household where my mother was a journalist, and journalists made no money, especially she did sort of local investigative news during a time when that particular business was being eroded. So I grew up, no heat, condemned house, it was not a great situation. So for me, growing up, writing equaled poverty. Like, that was not a thing I was going to do. I was fairly convinced I was never going to be a writer, even in young adulthood. So I sort of pushed back against writing as a concept for a career for quite a long time, even though I was doing it for my own entertainment and for D&D games and that kind of stuff on the side. And eventually, I sort of, what was it? It was a podcast by Mary Quall, Brendan Sanderson, Writing Excuses. Sorry. I listened to the Writing Excuses podcast, and it became clear to me that the industry had changed in such a way that it was a little more accessible. Like, you no longer had to go to New York or anything like that to actually, establish a career. So I started using the resources that they offered to look into it a bit more, became interested, and that's when I decided I was going to start selling stories. And I have never shelved a project because I thought it wasn't marketable. But once I actually decided, yes, I'm going to be a writer, I never shelved a project.
Yeah, I found I have definitely had projects where I was afraid they weren't marketable, but usually I just loved the story so much that I couldn't stop writing anyway. It was kind of like even if I'm writing this just for me, like I have to do it. It's gonna haunt my brain until I get it out. And that happened, for example, with my debut novel, which is about cannibals. Like, definitely not a great marketable thing on paper. But I think at the end of the day, you gotta kind of try to push that out of your head and just embrace your own weird shit and just
that's the good stuff.
Put that on the page. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. That annoying idea that won't leave you alone, even if it seems ridiculous. That's the project that sells and gets attention. Like, that's the good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's readers can feel the authenticity, like whether or not the author really loves a project or not. So you can't try to write for the market. You can just write. I mean,
traditional publishing moves so slowly. Like, by the time you finish the book you're writing in the market, the market's moved on. So just write whatever you want to write and what's fascinating you.
Sold your book just by saying Firefly whiskey and a badass woman. Can I steal that pitch? Because yes, that's perfect. I love it. Yes.
Permission. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for this gift.
Looks like they're all sort of equal. So what were your favorite books and authors you read when you were growing up?
I know if we're talking when I was young, I loved the Goosebumps books. Those were the first books that I was old enough to read for myself without my mom reading them to me. I think that's when I really fell in love with reading. From there, I don't know. It's tough because I feel I read so much stuff and so many different genres and things. I mentioned Ender's Game, which was a standout one for me. I liked, once I got a bit older, I liked Kurt Vonnegut and Haruki Murakami a lot. It's tough to think of specific ones for some reason. What about you? Do you have any?
It's a really, I would say 9 or 10. I got a hold of the Dark Elf Trilogy. I really loved that time. The whole, Dragonlance. Dragonlance was great. Basically a lot of the D&D tie-in novels I was really into for a while. And that was sort of because I came into fantasy through D&D. So I learned D&D, and then I found the tie-in novels, and then I found other original fantasy works. And by the time I got to the originals, I was Patricia A. McKillop, someone I read a lot of. I have all of her books actually sitting right next to me here. Terry Pratchett, same deal. I've got the entire Discworld right here. I've read those until some of the covers have fallen off. There's a lot of PG. I never know if it's pronounced Wodehouse or Woodhouse. PG Woodhouse, I think, is the pronunciation, which is not science fiction or fantasy, but it was something I devoured avidly at the time. And still do. I pick those up a lot.
I definitely went through a Dragon's phase. I remember that. Like Dragon Riders of Pern, I was super into.
Oh yeah, those are great.
Those were, yeah. It's so interesting that you got into D&D first.
Yeah, my mom was actually kind of anti-science fiction fantasy for a while. So I had a friend whose name was actually Arwen, who introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah.
Do you still play?
Oh yeah. It's harder now as adults, obviously, finding time, but still play. Play with a bunch of authors sometimes, which is a lot of fun.
That sounds like the dream.
Has your writing routine or subject matter you've been writing about changes at all during the pandemic? So has your routine or what you're writing about changed due to the pandemic?
I mean, routine for me has pretty much been the same. I already worked from home, both with writing and my day job, so the pandemic hasn't like super thrown my schedule off. I just kind of have more time at home. I did find, like, especially early in the pandemic, when everything was just a lot all the time. I mean, it still is, but when it was new and I wasn't yet used to there being new, terrible things every day, I found it hard to write sad things and like violent things, even though that's usually like my go-to. I just wanted to write like light, fluffy things to like comfort myself, I guess, all the time. And I was working on book 3, so I was like, I know this whole book can't just be them having a nice time, but what if it could? Yeah, eventually I got over that, thankfully. But it was kind of like that for a while. How about you?
I mean, my routine didn't change all too much. I also worked from home before the pandemic. I actually went full-time writing January this year. So I'd already kind of settled into that. And I had a very strange experience where the Christmas last year, my husband needed emergency surgery. And he ended up being home for quite a while for recovery. So he was sort of already home a bunch right up until like mid-February. And that's when he started going back to work. But then, of course, early March is when at least the Bay Area shut down, did our first shelter in place. So I had only about like 2 weeks of like normal writing time as a full-time writer before he came back to work from home. And it's been pretty much the same, honestly. I've got, thicker headphones now because he's a talker. And I get distracted easily. But that's about it.
What about your like subject matter? Have you found any difference in that? Or
Oh, thematic? No, not particularly.
It's awesome that you're both fans of D&D. What's your favorite class to play? I've played a bunch of different things, but right now I'm playing a Bard Rogue multi-class, and I think that's my favorite so far. It's just so many like things you can do both in combat and in role-playing with that. And Bards have the best spells, in my
That does sound fun.
opinion. How about you, Megan?
So lately I've been wait until everybody else rolls characters, and then I'll like fill the gap. The last group I played with that I'm still playing with occasionally, we came up with a bunch of say very squishy characters. So I was like, okay, I'll be a half-orc barbarian because somebody's got to tank this, and this is like everybody is going to die if we don't have somebody who can take a hit. And that's actually happened to me twice lately. So currently my most played character is a half-orc barbarian named Blueberry, who just wants to bake and is named her axe Muffin.
Oh.
We go ridiculous in D&D. We don't take it too seriously.
Ah, yes. Yeah, my current character is a circus performer turned aspiring pirate, so it's also, we've got a goofy group too.
Yeah. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I write serious books. I want to play ridiculous things.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, 2 minutes or 5 minutes left. So, should we do what's your favorite non-sci-fi activity or hobby?
Sure. So I guess non-sci-fi, I'm guessing that means we can't just say video games?
Yeah. I build robots sometimes. I think that doesn't count.
Well, sounds pretty sci-fi.
Yeah.
Sci-fi in real life.
Yeah, probably sewing and ballet for me. These like things that are least science fiction.
I really like cooking and gardening.
Nice.
Kind of nice to do stuff like that, I find, where you're using more of your hands and less of your brain. Kind of just relax.
Yeah. I like the physical creation. It's a totally different animal. Yeah. Then got How is Book 3 coming along? Which, for me, it's turned in. I finished copy edits, so
You're free.
I'm free. I've escaped.
I just
Until page
in.
proofs.
Oh yeah, those are usually not too bad. Well, actually, they're except for like the crushing weight of knowing this is your last chance to change anything. That is.
Yeah, you don't want to let it out of your hands. You gotta pry it out of me. It's one deadline I never want to hit.
Yeah. And yeah, I just turned in the first draft of my book 3. So.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
coming along. Yes.
I think we've gone quickly enough that we have time for. Have you ever been inspired to write something after a dream, or potentially after any other mind-altering experience? Like meditation. Definitely not referring to anything else you might be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, me neither. I'm lost personally.
Yeah, no idea. I actually don't remember my dreams particularly well.
Really?
Yeah.
I have really strange dreams, but they're mostly like just too stupid to inspire a book. So I don't know if I've ever had something directly from one. Actually, I do. I have one. I haven't written the story yet, but I have an idea because of a dream I had once where my brother was a werewolf and he kept killing people. And I was trying to cover his tracks by finding the bodies of the people he killed and cut them up to make it look like a serial killer instead of a werewolf so no one would know. And
it's a good sister.
Yeah, I'm a great sister. And it's like the strangest thing really was that my attitude the whole time I was doing this was just like, not again. Here he goes again. Like, so I've got that one like in my idea book. Maybe someday something will come of it.
That's a good one.
What's wrong with my brain?
That sounds like a fully functioning brain to me. Shall we tackle the wrap-up question?
All right. Yes, I believe it is time.
All right. So, question to wrap up with: what's something you've read or watched lately that you loved?
Would you like to start?
Sure, I've got an easy one because I recently read Nofic Gloss by Essa Hansen. Yeah, it was really good.
I'm reading it right now.
Yeah, and not well. I've lost track of how time works this year, but it feels recent. It might have been in March. The Last Watch by JS, I want to say Dews, Dewes. That was really good. Really unique world building there. Just like, I mean, Essa's got incredibly unique world building too. It's been really good.
And yeah, I'm currently reading Notebook Gloss. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm already deeply in love with it. It's amazing. Everyone should read it. And I just finished up the last season of The Good Place.
Oh, nice.
Party. But yeah, it was amazing. I cried like a little baby. It was embarrassing, but it was really, really good. I think it was one of the best final episodes of any TV show I've ever seen. So I loved that.
Awesome.
And yeah, I guess that is it. So thanks for coming, everyone, and thanks, Megan. I'm so excited I got a chance to talk to you and ask you about your brilliant plot twists and pick your brain a bit.
Thank you for having me on your launch day event. That's so exciting.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.